Deho wiped the grease from his hands with an old cloth. The metal he was working on still needed more welding, but his back hurt from bending over the workbench all day. His small shop on level 7 of Nexus Station was not much to look at. Old parts filled every corner. Half-broken engines sat waiting for repair. The air smelled like burned metal and oil. He owned this tiny space and the small room above it where he slept. It was enough for him. Deho liked working alone. People were complicated. Machines made sense. You could fix them if you knew what you were doing. The station around him buzzed with activity. Nexus Station sat at the edge of known space where 3 major trade routes met. Ships from dozens of worlds came here to trade, refuel, and make deals. Most of the good business happened on the upper levels where the fancy shops and offices were. Down here on level 7, people like Deho fixed things for whoever could pay. A loud crash made him look up from his work. Someone had knocked over a stack of metal pipes near his shop entrance. Deho started to call out, then stopped. A woman stood in his doorway, breathing hard like she had been running. She was not human. Her skin had a soft blue tint that caught the light. Silver hair fell past her shoulders in waves. Her clothes were torn and dirty. She looked scared, very scared. "Please," she said in accented but clear English. "I need help." Deho set down his tools. "What kind of help?" Before she could answer, he heard voices getting closer, loud voices speaking in the harsh language used by hegemony forces. The woman heard them too. Her face went white with terror. "They are coming for me," she whispered. "I am Silvani. They hunt my people." Deho knew about the Silvani. Their world had fallen to the hegemony 6 months ago. The news reports said it was a peaceful integration. Other refugee stories told a different truth. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside his shop. The woman looked around desperately for somewhere to hide. There was nowhere. The shop was too small and open. "Listen to me," she said quickly, grabbing his arm. "I know this is strange, but I need you to pretend we know each other. Pretend we are married. The hegemony has laws about bonded pairs. It cannot separate spouses without proof of deception." The footsteps were almost at his door. Deho looked into her eyes. He saw pure desperation there. Also hope. She was trusting him completely, this stranger who did not even know her name. He made his choice. "What took you so long getting back?" said loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "I was starting to worry." Relief flooded her face. She moved closer to him, just as 3 hegemony enforcement officers appeared in his doorway. They wore black uniforms with red trim. Their faces were hidden behind dark helmets. 2 were human. The 3rd was from a species Deho did not recognize. "Citizen," the lead officer said. His voice came out distorted through his helmet speaker. "We are tracking a fugitive. Silvani female, approximately this height, blue-tinted skin, silver hair." Deho looked confused. "Fugitive? What did she do? That is not your concern? Have you seen anyone matching this description?" The woman moved to stand beside Deho. She slipped her hand into his like it was natural. Her skin was warm despite. "It's blue tint, officers. Is there a problem?" she asked. "My husband and I were just finishing work for the day." The lead officer stepped closer. "You are Silvani." "Yes, I am." "My name is Valara. This is my husband, Deho." "We have been married for 2 years. Identification," the officer demanded. Valara reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device. Deho recognized it as a standard civilian ID pad. The officer took it and scanned the information. His helmet display flickered as he checked databases. "This shows you as an unmarried refugee who arrived on the station 3 days ago," he said. Deho felt Valara tense beside him, but she did not let go of his hand. "That information is outdated," Deho said. "We got married yesterday in a private ceremony. The paperwork takes time to update in the system. You know how slow station bureaucracy can be?" This was a complete lie, but he said it with the tired tone of someone dealing with annoying paperwork delays. The officers looked at each other. "You have proof of this marriage?" the second officer asked. "In our quarters upstairs," Valara said smoothly. "Would you like me to get the certificate?" "That will not be necessary," the lead officer said. But he did not sound convinced. "You understand that providing false information to hegemony forces is a serious crime?" "Of course," Deho replied. "But I am confused about why you are questioning." "My wife What exactly is she supposed to have done? The officers did not answer directly. They spent several more minutes asking questions about how long they had known each other, where they met, details about their relationship. Valara answered most of them, showing surprising knowledge about Deho's work and daily routine. Must have been watching the shop before she came inside. Finally, the officers seemed satisfied that they could not legally separate the couple without more evidence. Hegemony law was strict about interfering with bonded pairs, especially when one partner was from a neutral species like humans. We will be monitoring this situation, the lead officer warned. If we discover any deception, there will be consequences. They left, their heavy boots echoing as they moved down the corridor to continue their search. Deho, and Valara stood in silence for several minutes after the officers disappeared. She still held his hand. He could feel her trembling. "Fuck you," she whispered finally. "You saved my life. Are you hungry?" he asked. It seemed like a practical question. "I have food upstairs." She nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I have not eaten in 2 days." Deho led her to the narrow stairs behind his workbench. His living space was small but clean. Bed, a small kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs, and a window that looked out at the station's central hub. He heated up some soup and watched her eat. She was clearly exhausted. Her hands shook as she held the spoon. When she finished, she looked up at him with gratitude. "My name is Valara," she said. "I am sorry for involving you in this. I did not know what else to do. You did not need to." "Explain," Deho replied. "We can figure out what comes next tomorrow." Deho stared at the ceiling and wondered what he had gotten himself into. He knew almost nothing about this woman except that she was running from something terrible. But when he had looked into her eyes and seen her desperate hope, the choice had been easy. Sometimes you helped people because it was the right thing to do. No other reason needed. 3 days had passed since Valara claimed Deho as her husband. Word traveled fast on Nexus Station, especially on the lower levels where everyone knew everyone else's business. By morning, half the merchants in the sector were talking about the quiet salvage operator who had secretly married an alien woman. Deho opened his shop as usual. But today felt different. People kept walking by to get a look at his new wife. Some seemed curious. Others appeared angry. Mrs. Kim from the noodle stand across the corridor kept shaking her head and muttering about mixed relationships. Valara had insisted on helping. With the work, she wore one of Deho's old work shirts over her torn clothes. The shirt was too big for her, but she had rolled up the sleeves and gotten to work without complaint. "Hand me that plasma cutter," she said, pointing at a tool on the workbench. Deho watched as she expertly adjusted the settings and began cutting through a damaged hull plate. Her movements were precise and confident. This was not the desperate refugee from 3 days ago. Working with machines seemed to calm her. "You know ships?" he observed. "Was an engineer on my homeworld," Valara replied without looking up. "Fusion systems mostly, but I learned general repair work too." A customer entered the shop. Old man Park, who owned a small cargo hauler that broke down every few months. He stopped when he saw Valara working and stared at her blue-tinted skin. Deho Park said slowly, "I heard rumors, but I did not believe them." "What rumors?" Deho asked, though he already knew. "That you married one of them, a Sylvani." The way Park said them made Deho's jaw tighten. "Her name is Valara. She is my wife." Park shook his head. "Boy, do you know what you have done? The hegemony does not like mixed unions. You are asking for trouble. My personal life is not. Your concern, Deho replied firmly. Did you bring your ship for repairs, or just to gossip? Park left without saying another word. Valara had stopped working and was listening to the conversation. Her hands were clenched around the plasma cutter. He is not wrong, she said quietly. I'm putting you in danger just by being here. Let me worry about that, Deho said. We need to make this look real. Married couples work together. Over the next few hours, more people came by. Some were genuinely friendly. The teenage boy who delivered parts seemed excited to meet an actual alien. A few of the other shop owners offered congratulations. Deho could tell some of them were just being polite. But there were also cold stares and whispered comments. The baker, who usually sold him breakfast, refused to serve him. A group of dock workers made crude jokes loud enough for Valara to hear. She handled it all with quiet dignity. But Deho could see the hurt in her eyes. Around midday, Station Administrator Beacon Su arrived for an unexpected inspection. He was a thin man with gray hair who took his job very seriously. 2 security guards accompanied him. Deho Administrator Beak said formally, I understand congratulations are in order. Thank you, sir. I was not aware you were in a relationship. This marriage seems rather sudden. Valara stepped forward and bowed politely. Administrator Beak, I am honored to meet you. My husband has told me much about your fair leadership of this station. Deho had never mentioned the administrator to her, but Valara spoke as if they had discussed him many times. She moved closer to Deho and took his arm in a gesture that looked completely natural. When did this marriage take place? Beak asked. Days ago, Valara answered smoothly. It was a small ceremony. It's very private. My husband is not one for big celebrations. This was true. Deho avoided crowds and parties whenever possible. Valara somehow knew this about him already. I will need to see the marriage documentation, Beak said. Of course, Deho replied. I can have the paperwork sent to your office tomorrow. The processing office has been slow lately. Beak nodded but continued asking questions. Where had they met? How long had they known each other? What were their plans for the future? Valara answered most of the questions. She said they had met when she came to the station as a refugee and needed ship repairs. They had talked many times over several weeks. She spoke about Deho's kindness and how safe. He made her feel what surprised Deho was how much truth was in her answers. She did feel safe with him. He had been kind to her. She clearly had been watching his shop and learning about his habits before she came inside that first day. My husband works very hard, Valara said, looking at Deho with affection that seemed completely real. He takes care of everyone who needs help. That is why I fell in love with him. Deho felt his face grow warm. The way she said it, even he almost believed it. Administrator Beak seemed satisfied with their answers. He warned them that there might be additional questions from higher authorities, then left with his guards. That was well done, Deho said. After they were alone, I observed you for several days before approaching your shop, Valara admitted. I needed to know if you were someone I could trust. You helped that old woman carry her heavy packages? You gave free repairs to the young couple with the broken shuttle. You're a good man, Deho. Before he could respond, the shop's proximity alarm chimed. Someone was blocking the entrance. 3 men entered, led by Han Jamin, a local crime boss who controlled much of the illegal activity on levels 6 and 7 J-Min. Was a big man who wore expensive clothes and too much jewelry. His 2 companions looked like hired muscle. All 3 stared at Valara with obvious interest. Deho, my friend, Jamin said with a smile that did not reach his eyes. I hear you have come into some very valuable property. If you mean my wife, she is not property, Deho replied carefully. Of course not. But you must understand. There are people willing to pay substantial amounts for information about Silvani refugees, especially ones who might have useful knowledge. Do not know what you mean, Jamin. Walked closer to Valara. Your wife was an engineer, yes? She might know things about Silvani technology, military secrets, industrial processes, very valuable information. My wife knows how to fix ships, Deho said. Nothing more, perhaps. But others might want to ask her themselves. I could arrange introductions, very profitable introductions. Valara stepped forward. I'm not interested in your introductions, Jameen laughed. You do not get to choose. Pretty one, but do not worry. I am a reasonable man. I will give your husband time to consider my offer. He turned back to Deho. 3 days. Think about it. This could solve all your money problems. Buy you a bigger shop, a better life. And if I refuse, Jameen's smile disappeared. That would be unfortunate. Accidents happen in places like this. Equipment malfunctions, fires start, people get hurt. After the 3 men left, Deho locked the shop entrance and checked the security system. Valara sat heavily on a work stool. Should leave, she said. I am bringing too much trouble to your life. Where would you go? I do not know. But I cannot let them hurt you because of me. Deho looked at this woman who had stumbled into his quiet life and turned everything upside down. 3 days ago, his biggest worry was paying rent. Now, he was facing threats from crime bosses and questions from station administrators. But when he looked at Valara, he did not feel angry or scared. He felt protective. She was brave and smart and kind. Shh. Deserved better than running and hiding for the rest of her life. We will figure something out, he said. Together. That night, as they shared dinner in his small quarters, Deho realized their fake marriage was starting to feel less fake. They worked well together. They trusted each other. Despite the danger, he was happier than he had been in years. Jamin's 3-day deadline was counting down. Soon they would have to make a choice that would change everything. The explosion happened at dawn. Deho woke to the sound of sirens and the smell of smoke. He rushed to his window and saw flames coming from the level below. Someone had bombed the power station that supplied energy to half of level 7. That was a warning, Valara said from behind him. She was already dressed and packing her few belongings into a small bag. Min wants to show you what happens when people refuse his offers. Deho's 3 days were up today. He'd spent the time trying to find other options, but there were none. The station's security would not help against someone like Jamin. The administrators cared more about avoiding trouble than protecting refugees. They were on their own. We need to leave, he said. Now, Deho had been preparing for this possibility. His ship, the Steady Hand, was docked in Bay 94 on the outer ring. It was an old cargo freighter that he had modified over the years. Not pretty, but reliable. More importantly, it was fueled and ready to fly. They moved quickly through the station corridors, avoiding the main passages where security cameras watched everything. Deho knew all the maintenance tunnels, service routes from years of moving ship parts around the station, as they climbed through a ventilation shaft that led to the docking ring. Valara grabbed his arm. Wait, she whispered. There is something. You need to know before we leave together. Tell me later. You need to keep moving. No, now, because what I tell you might change your mind about helping me. They stopped in the cramped space. Emergency lights cast strange shadows on Valara's face. I was not just an engineer on my homeworld, she said quietly. I was part of the resistance movement. We tried to stop the hegemony invasion. I have information they want very badly. What kind of information? Technical specifications for their communication systems? They use stolen Sylvani technology to coordinate their fleets across vast distances. But there is a weakness in the design, a flaw that could be exploited. Deho understood now why Jamin was so interested in her. This was not about simple revenge or money. This was about military secrets that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Why did you not tell me before? Yes. Because I wanted to. Protect you. The less you knew, the safer you would be. But if we leave together, you deserve to know what you are risking your life for. Deho looked at this woman who had already turned his quiet life upside down. Now she was telling him she carried secrets that could make them targets for the most powerful military force in known space. Does this information help people? He asked. It could save millions of lives, maybe more. Then we keep moving. They reached the docking bay without being spotted. The Steady Hand looked exactly like what it was, an old working ship that had seen better days. But Deho had spent years improving its engines and systems. It would get them where they needed to go. As they prepared for departure, station control contacted them for a routine flight plan. Deho told them he was taking his wife on a honeymoon trip to the outer colonies. The controller seemed bored and approved their departure without questions, but as they pulled away from the station, Valara spotted something on the scanner that made her blood run cold. "Hegemony patrol ships," she said. 3 of them, moving. To intercept our course. How did they find us so fast? Jamin must have contacted them when he realized we were leaving. He gets paid either way. The patrol ships were faster and better armed than the Steady Hand. In a straight fight, Deho and Valara would lose quickly. But Deho had been flying freight routes for 15 years. He knew tricks that military pilots never learned. "Hold on," he said, diving toward a nearby asteroid field. The rocks were huge, some as big as small moons. They tumbled slowly through space, creating a maze of obstacles that would challenge even experienced pilots. The patrol ships followed but had to slow down to avoid collisions. There, Valara pointed at the scanner. "That asteroid has caves. If we can hide inside, they might lose us." Deho guided the ship through narrow passages between the floating. Rock's laser fire from the patrol ships lit up the space around them, but the asteroids provided cover. He found the cave entrance Valara had spotted and flew inside just as a massive explosion shook the asteroid field. "What was that?" Valara asked. "One of the patrol ships hit a rock," Deho replied, checking his instruments. "They are not used to flying in conditions like this." They waited in the cave for 6 hours. When they finally emerged, the remaining patrol ships were gone. But their victory came at a cost. Steady Hand had taken damage from debris during their escape. The ship's reactor was running hot and making strange noises. "We need to land somewhere for repairs," Deho said, studying. "The engine readouts. Somewhere, the hegemony will not think to look." Valara checked the star charts. There, Kepler 44 to B. It is a frontier world. There are no major settlements, but there are people there. Miners, farmers, people who do not ask too many questions. The planet appeared on their view screen as they approached. It was mostly green and blue with scattered continents and large oceans. Not wealthy enough to attract hegemony attention, but developed enough to have repair facilities. They landed at a small spaceport outside a mining town called Haven Creek. The place looked rough, but honest. Working people who minded their own business and expected others to do the same. A woman in medical robes approached their ship as they shut down the engines. She was human, middle-aged, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical style. "Welcome to Haven Creek." She said, "I am Dr. Park Hyjin. Are you folks in need of medical attention?" "Just ship repairs," Deho replied. "Engine trouble." Dr. Park looked at them carefully, taking in Valara's blue-tinted skin and their obviously hurried departure from wherever they had come from. "Engine trouble," she repeated. "Of course. Well, you have come to the right place. We see a lot of that around here." She led them to her medical clinic, which was also the closest thing Haven Creek had to a hotel. Over dinner, she explained that the town was home to many refugees and people running from various problems. "The hegemony does not bother with places like this," she said. "Not enough profit in it. But they have been asking questions lately, looking for specific people." "What kind of people?" Valara asked. "Sylvani mostly, engineers and scientists. They seem very interested in finding them." Directly, but her meaning was clear. She knew what Valara was, and she was offering help. That night, as they slept in the clinic's small guest room, Deho realized their situation had changed completely. They were no longer just running from station criminals or local authorities. They were fugitives from the most powerful military force in the galaxy, but they were also not alone. Dr. Park represented something Deho had not expected to find: organized resistance. People who were willing to help refugees and fight back against hegemony oppression. "What are you thinking about?" Valara asked from the other bed. "I am thinking our fake marriage might be the least complicated thing in our lives right now." Valara laughed softly. "Are you regretting helping me?" Deho considered the question seriously. Week ago, his biggest worry was paying rent on his shop now. He was a fugitive carrying military secrets across hostile space. His old life was gone forever. No, he said finally. I am not regretting it. Outside their window, the stars of Kepler 4 for 2B's night sky looked different from the ones he had known on Nexus Station. But somehow, despite everything that had happened, Deho felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. Tomorrow, they would start looking for parts to repair their ship. They would also start learning about the resistance network that Dr. Park represented. The information Valara carried was too important to keep hidden, and there were people who needed to hear it. Their running was not over. In many ways it was just beginning.
Ow!
But they would face whatever came next together, just as they had faced everything else since that first desperate moment in his shop. Dr. Park led them through the town before sunrise. Haven Creek was bigger than it looked from the spaceport. Underground tunnels connected buildings, and hidden rooms housed equipment that had nothing to do with mining. This was not just a frontier settlement. It was a carefully disguised resistance base. How many people know about this? Deho asked as they walked through a tunnel filled with communication equipment. Enough, Dr. Park replied. But not too many. Security is everything in work like this. They emerged in a large underground chamber, carved from solid rock. Maps covered the walls, showing star systems and trade routes. Computer terminals hummed with encrypted data streams. 20 people worked at various stations, analyzing information and coordinating activities across multiple worlds. A woman in military uniform approached them. She was tall and confident, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Despite being underground on a frontier planet, she carried herself like someone used to command. Dr. Park tells me you have interesting cargo, the woman said. I am Commander Lee Sujin, formerly of Earth Defense Force. Now, I coordinate refugee protection and resistance activities in this sector. Valara stepped forward. My name is Valara. I was an engineer with the Sylvani resistance before our world fell, and you carry technical information that could help our cause? Yes, but sharing it means revealing locations of other resistance cells. People will die if this information is used incorrectly. Commander Lee nodded approvingly. Good, someone who understands operational security. We have been waiting for someone like you. She led them to a secure briefing room where 3 other people waited. 2 were human refugees from hegemony-occupied worlds. The third was a tall alien with gray skin and 4 arms who introduced himself as a former hegemony naval officer who had defected after witnessing war crimes. The hegemony expansion has accelerated in the past year, Commander Lee explained, activating a holographic display. They have conquered 12 systems and enslaved billions of people. Their secret is speed. They can coordinate attacks across vast distances using stolen Sylvani communication technology. Valara studied the display. The quantum entanglement communicators. My team helped design the original prototypes before the hegemony stole them. Can they be stopped? Not stopped, but disrupted. There is a cascade failure vulnerability in the network architecture. If you overload the primary nodes simultaneously, the entire system crashes for several hours. The defected hegemony officer leaned forward. Several hours would be enough. Fleets depend completely on real-time coordination. Without it, they become just individual ships with no unified command. What would we need to trigger this cascade failure? Commander Lee asked. Valara hesitated. Access to at least 3 primary communication hubs. They are heavily defended. It would be a suicide mission. Not necessarily, said one of the human. Refugees. We have been mapping hegemony facilities for months. Some are more vulnerable than others. Over the following days, Deho watched Valara work with the resistance technical team. Her knowledge was even more extensive than she had revealed. She understood not just the communication systems, but also hegemony ship designs, weapon technologies, and strategic weaknesses. But the work was taking a toll on her. She barely slept, spending long hours explaining complex technical concepts. 2 people who lacked her advanced education. She was driven by guilt over her fallen homeworld and determination to prevent other worlds from suffering the same fate. You need to rest, Deho told her one evening as they walked through Haven. Creek's quiet streets. There is no time for rest. Every day we delay, more people die. And if you collapse from exhaustion, you help no one. Valara stopped walking and looked at him. Why are you here, Deho? Could have stayed on the station, found another woman. To marry for real, had a normal life. It was a question he had been asking himself. A week ago, he would not have imagined joining a military resistance movement. He was not a soldier or a spy. He fixed ships for a living. I'm here because you are here, he said simply. That is reason enough. She took his hand. This is not the life you chose. Maybe not, but it is the life I want now. Commander Lee interrupted their conversation by approaching with urgent news. We have intelligence about a major hegemony operation. They are planning to attack the Rigel colonies next week. 500,000 civilians live there. Can we warn them? Valara asked. Warning them is not enough. Ack! The colonies have no military defenses. But if we could disrupt the hegemony communications during the attack, their fleet would lose coordination. The colonists might have time to evacuate. It would require infiltrating at least one communication hub, Valara said. I told you it is almost impossible. Almost impossible is not the same as completely impossible, Deho said. What would it take? Commander Lee activated a holographic display showing a hegemony research station orbiting a gas giant. This facility processes communication protocols for the entire sector. It is also the least defended of the primary hubs. Why is it less defended? Because it is disguised as a civilian research station. They cannot put obvious military defenses on it without revealing its true purpose. Valara studied the station design. I know this type of facility. I could get inside and plant a virus in their system, but I would need help. What kind of help? Someone who understands basic electronics, but is not obviously military. Someone who could pose as a civilian contractor. Everyone looked at Deho. He had spent years working with ship electronics and computer systems. He was not trained for espionage. But that might actually be an advantage. He would not behave like a spy because he was not one. I could do it, he said, surprising himself. Deho. No, Valara protested. This is too dangerous. I cannot ask you to risk your life for something that is not your fight. It became my fight when I decided to help you. Besides, we work well together. You said so yourself. Commander Lee looked between them. He would be posing as a married couple of independent contractors. The station needs maintenance work on their civilian systems. It is perfect cover. And if something goes wrong, Valara asked, then we improvise. We have gotten this far by adapting to problems as they arise. The resistance team spent 3 days preparing for the mission. They created false identification documents and work contracts. They loaded the steady hand with legitimate repair equipment along with the hidden virus components Valara would need. Most importantly, they practiced their cover story until it became second nature. Deho and Valara were a young married couple who specialized in station maintenance. They had been working together for 2 years. They were saving money to buy their own repair facility. The night before they left, Dr. Park gave them a final briefing. Remember, your marriage is your protection, she said. The hegemony is suspicious of individuals, but they rarely question bonded pairs. Let them see you care about each other. This was not difficult advice to follow. Over the past weeks, their fake relationship had become increasingly real. They trusted each other completely. They worked together smoothly. And despite the danger, they were happier together than either had been alone. One more thing, Commander, Lee added. If this mission succeeds, you will become high-priority targets. The hegemony will hunt you across the galaxy. There will be no going back to quiet lives. Deho looked at Valara. You ready for that? I have been ready since the day my world fell. The question is whether you are ready. Deho thought. About his old life on Nexus Station, the small shop, the routine work, the loneliness. It had been safe and predictable. It had also been empty. I am ready, he said. As they prepared to leave Haven Creek, Deho realized something had changed. In how he thought about their relationship, somewhere between the desperate escape from the station and the planning of this dangerous mission, Valara had stopped being the refugee. He was helping and become his partner in every sense of the word. They were about to infiltrate a heavily guarded hegemony facility with nothing but fake documents and each other. It was terrifying. It was also exactly where he wanted to be. Their fake marriage was about to face its biggest test yet. But Deho was no longer worried about maintaining their cover story. He was worried about keeping the woman he loved alive long enough to complete their mission and find out what kind of future they could build together. The Hegemony Research Station looked peaceful from a distance. It orbited the gas giant Kronos 7 like a small metal moon, its solar panels gleaming in the starlight. No weapon turrets were visible. No patrol ships circled the perimeter. It appeared to be exactly what it claimed to be, a civilian research facility. Deho guided the steady hand toward the docking bay, following the approach vectors provided by station control. In the passenger seat, Valara reviewed their cover documents one final time. She wore simple work clothes and had styled her silver hair in a practical bun. The blue tint of her skin was unusual but not illegal. Mixed-species marriages were uncommon but not forbidden in hegemony space. Independent contractors Deho and Valara Kim reporting for maintenance duty, Deho announced over the communication channel. Acknowledged, steady hand. Proceed to docking bay 7. Station Director Yoon Murray will meet you for orientation. The docking bay was larger than expected, with several other civilian ships already berthed. Workers moved cargo and equipment. Between the ships and the station, everything looked normal, but Valara noticed details that worried her. Those workers are all human, she whispered as they walked toward the station entrance. No aliens, except for obvious slaves. And look at their movements. Too precise, too coordinated. They have military training. Director Yoon Mir was waiting for them in the reception area. She was a middle-aged Korean woman in an expensive business suit, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every detail about her visitors. She smiled warmly, but the smile never reached her eyes. "Welcome aboard Research Station Harmony," she said in perfect English. "I trust your journey was comfortable." "Long but uneventful," Deho replied. "We are eager to begin work on your environmental systems." "Excellent. You come highly recommended. Your previous clients praised your technical skills and discretion." Resistance had done good work creating their false history. According to their documents, they had maintained life support systems on 3 different stations over the past 2 years. The references would check out if anyone investigated. Director Yoon led them on a tour of the facility. The public areas. Looked exactly like a research station should. Laboratories filled with scientific equipment. Computer terminals, running data analysis programs. Researchers in white coats discussing their work in hushed tones. But Valara noticed things that did not belong. Security cameras in every corridor, more than any civilian facility would need. Restricted access doors with military-grade locks. And underneath the normal sounds of a working station, she could hear the distinctive hum of quantum communication equipment. "Your quarters are on level 5, Director," Yoon explained as they rode the elevator upward. "Married contractors receive private accommodations, of course. Dinner is served in the main cafeteria at 1800 hours. Work begins tomorrow at 0800. Their room was small, but comfortable, with a bed, desk, and small bathroom. More importantly, it was not monitored. Valara had checked for surveillance devices while Director Yoon was talking. "She suspects something," Valara whispered as soon as they were alone. "What makes you think that?" The way she looked at us was evaluating, not just being polite. And this tour showed us too much of the station. She was watching our reactions. Deho sat on the bed and pulled out a small tablet. "Should we abort the mission?" "Not yet. But we need to be very careful. One mistake, and we will not leave this station alive." That evening at dinner, they sat with other contractors and researchers. The conversation was normal enough: complaints about working conditions, gossip about colleagues, technical discussions about various projects. But Valara noticed that none of the researchers mentioned what they were actually researching. After dinner, they returned to their quarters and began planning. Their official work would take them to the Environmental Control Center on level 3. From there, Valara could access the main computer network and upload the virus that would disrupt the communication system. "How long will you need?" Deho asked. 20 minutes if everything goes perfectly. Longer if I encounter security protocols I did not expect. And if someone discovers what you are doing. Valara reached into her toolkit and showed him a device that looked like a standard electrical meter. This contains enough explosive to destroy the entire communication array. If we are caught, I can still complete the mission. Deho stared at the device. That would kill us too. Yes. But it would save the Rigel colonies. 500,000 people, Deho. Their lives are worth more than ours. Not to me. Promise me you will not use that unless there is absolutely no other choice. I promise to be careful. That is all I can promise. The next morning, they reported for work at the Environmental Control Center. Space was filled with machinery that regulated air quality, temperature, and atmospheric pressure throughout the station. It was also connected to every major system on the station, including the hidden communication equipment. The station's chief engineer, a nervous man named Park Dungman, showed them which systems needed maintenance. Most of the work was routine, replacing filters, calibrating sensors, updating software, but it gave Valara access to computer terminals throughout the center. I will need to run diagnostics on the main environmental computer, she told Engineer Park. That will require about 30 minutes of uninterrupted access. Of course, I will be in the next room if you need anything. As soon as they were alone, Valara connected her portable computer to the station's network. Code scrolled across her screen as she navigated through security barriers and located the communication system. "How's it going?" Deho asked, standing watch at the door. "Slower than expected. They have upgraded their security since I last saw these systems, but I can still break through." 20 minutes passed, then 30. Valara continued working, sweat beading on her forehead as she fought through layers of encryption and security protocols. "Someone is coming," Deho warned. Warren Bellar quickly disconnected her computer and picked up a standard diagnostic tool just as Engineer Park returned. "How are the diagnostics proceeding?" he asked. "Nearly finished. Just checking the backup life. Support systems now." Park nodded and left again. Valara immediately reconnected to the network. "I found it," she whispered. "The communication hub is on level 8, section C, but there is a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The access is restricted to senior staff only. I cannot reach it from here." Deho thought quickly. "What if we created a maintenance emergency? Something that would require immediate attention on level 8. That could work, but it would have to be convincing." Valara modified the environmental systems to trigger a false alarm about atmospheric contamination on level 8. Within minutes, emergency alerts were sounding throughout the station. "Environmental team to level 8 immediately," the station intercom announced. "Potential atmospheric breach in section C." They gathered their tools and hurried to the elevator. Other technicians and emergency response teams crowded into the lift, all heading to deal with the crisis that Valara had created. Level 8 was in chaos when they arrived. Technicians ran between computer terminals, trying to locate the source of the contamination readings. Emergency lights flashed red and yellow. In the confusion, no one noticed 2 additional environmental specialists slipping into section C. The communication hub was hidden behind a door marked Restricted Authorized Personnel Only. Valara used a device from her toolkit to override the electronic lock. Inside, they found a room filled with quantum communication equipment identical to what Valara had helped design on her homeworld. Banks of processors hummed as they handled data streams from across the galaxy. This was the nerve center that coordinated hegemony military operations. "It is worse than I thought," Valara said, studying the equipment displays. "They are not just planning to attack the Rigel colonies. There are simultaneous operations scheduled against 6 different systems. Can you stop all of them?" "I think so. But uploading the virus will take at least 15 minutes. And once I start, there is no hiding what we are doing." Before Deho could respond, the door behind them hissed open. Director Yoon stepped into the room, flanked by 2 armed guards. "I was wondering when you would make your move," she said calmly. "Though I admit the false environmental emergency was cleverly done." Valera's hand moved toward her toolkit, but the guards raised their weapons. "I would not recommend that," Director Yoon continued. "We know about the explosive device. We also..." know about your real identities? Valara of the Sylvani Resistance, and Daeho Kim, formerly of Nexus Station. How long have you known? Daeho asked. Since before you arrived. Did you really think we would not investigate independent contractors? Requesting access to our most sensitive systems? Your false documents were quite good, but not perfect. And why'd you let us come aboard? Director Yoon smiled, because we wanted to see what you would do. And because my superiors are very interested in speaking with Valara about certain technical information she possesses. The guards moved closer, and Daeho realized their mission was over before it had truly begun. But as he looked at Valara, he saw something in her eyes that was not defeat. It was determination. The station's emergency systems screamed as fires spread through Level 8. Daeho and Valara ran through corridors filled with smoke while security teams searched for them. The destruction of the communication hub had triggered chaos throughout the facility. Without their coordination network, the hegemony personnel could not organize an effective response. This way, Valara said, leading them toward a maintenance shaft she had memorized during their tours. We can reach the docking bay through the service tunnels. Behind them, they could hear Director Yoon shouting orders over the alarm sirens. Seal all exits. Find those saboteurs. The maintenance tunnel was narrow and dark. They crawled through it for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. By now, the communication disruption would be spreading through the entire hegemony network. Look, Valara pointed toward the observation windows that showed space outside the station. The hegemony fleet is breaking formation. This was right. The warships that had been moving in perfect coordination toward their targets were now drifting without direction. Out. Some were turning back toward their bases. Others seemed to be trying to reach their destinations on their own. But without centralized command, the massive simultaneous attack was falling apart. The Rigel colonies are safe, Daeho said. For now, we need to get off this station before they restore communications. They reached the docking bay to find it in chaos. Security guards were checking every ship and questioning all personnel. The steady hand sat in Bay 7, but 3 armed guards stood between them and their escape route. We need a distraction, Daeho said. Valara smiled and pulled out another device from her toolkit. I saved one surprise for the end. People and objects floated briefly in the air before crashing back down. Emergency lights flashed as the station's computer systems struggled to compensate for the sudden power drain. In the confusion, Daeho and Valara ran for their ship. The guards were too busy trying to stay on their feet to notice 2 more people in maintenance uniforms rushing through the docking bay. They reached the steady hand and began the startup sequence. The ship's engines were warming up when Director Yoon's voice echoed through the station's communication system. Attention all personnel. 2 saboteurs are attempting to escape in Bay 7. Stop them at all costs. How long until we can launch? Valara asked as laser fire began hitting their ship's hull. 2 more minutes, Daeho replied, his hands flying over the control panels. The engines need time to reach full power. Squad of security guards entered the docking bay and began setting up heavy weapons aimed at their ship. At the same time, the bay's magnetic clamps activated, trying to hold the steady hand in place. They are trying to disable our engines, Valara said, studying the weapon readings. 1 direct hit from those cannons, and we will not be going anywhere. Daeho looked at the woman beside him. A month ago, she had been a desperate refugee. Now she was a resistance fighter who had just struck a major blow against the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Somehow, in the middle of all this danger, she was also the person he loved more than his own life. Valara, he said as laser fire continued to pound their shields. When we get out of here, I want to marry you for real. She looked at him with surprise. You are proposing to me during a firefight? I am proposing to you because of the firefight. Because in all this chaos and danger, you are the one thing that makes sense to me. Ask me again when we are not about to die, she said, but she was smiling. The engines finally reached full power. Daeho fired the ship's emergency thrusters, tearing free from the magnetic clamps with a screech of metal. The steady hand shot out of the docking bay just as the security team's heavy weapons opened fire. But their troubles were not over. 3 patrol ships had been stationed around the research station, without communication with their command center. The pilots were acting independently, but they still recognized a fleeing enemy vessel when they saw one. "They are faster than us," Valera observed, as the patrol ships began pursuit. "But they are not smarter than us," Deho replied. He guided their ship toward the gas giant that the station orbited. The massive planet's atmosphere was filled with electrical storms and radiation that would interfere with sensors and weapons. It was dangerous, but it also provided cover. The patrol ships followed them into the storm clouds. But the pilots were not experienced with atmospheric flying. One ship lost control in the turbulence and crashed into the planet's surface. Other two were forced to retreat when their shields failed under the electrical bombardment. "We made it," Valera said, as they cleared the storm and jumped to hyperspace. "We made it," Deho agreed. 3 days later, they arrived back at Haven Creek. The Resistance base was celebrating. News had reached them about the successful disruption of hegemony communications. The attack on the Rigel colonies had been completely stopped. Similar attacks on 5 other systems had also failed. Commander Lee met them at the landing pad with a broad smile. "You did it. The entire hegemony expansion has ground to a halt while they try to rebuild their communication network."
How long?
"Will that take?" Valera asked. "Months? Maybe longer? And during that time, we will be working to ensure they never get the chance to use stolen Sylvani technology again." Dr. Park approached with medical supplies. "You both look like you could use some rest." "Actually," Deho said, taking Valera's hand, "we were hoping you could perform a wedding ceremony." Dr. Park looked confused. "But I thought you were already married." "That was for legal protection," Valera explained. "This is for us." The wedding took place 3 days later in Haven Creek's main square. It was a simple ceremony with no fancy decorations or expensive clothes. But it was real in every way that mattered. Commander Lee served as Deho's best man. Dr. Park officiated. Refugees from a dozen different worlds attended as guests. Some had been helped by the Resistance Network. Others were Resistance fighters themselves. All of them understood what it meant to find hope and love in the middle of war and chaos. "Do you, Deho, take Valera to be your wife in times of peace, in times of war, in safety, and in danger?" Dr. Park asked. "I do," Deho said, looking into Valera's eyes. "Do you, Valera, take Deho to be your husband, to stand with him against whatever challenges you may face together?" "I do," Valera replied. "Then by the authority given to me by this community of free people, I pronounce you husband and wife." As they kissed, the crowd cheered. Children threw flower petals. Someone started playing music. For a moment, the war seemed very far away. Later that evening, as they walked through Haven Creek's quiet streets, Valera asked the question that had been on both their minds. "What do we do now?" "We keep fighting," Deho said. "The hegemony? We'll recover eventually. They do. People like us will need to be ready. In between battles." Deho stopped walking and turned to face his wife. His real wife now, not just his pretend one. "Between battles, we build something better. A place where people from different worlds can live together without fear. Where refugees become citizens and strangers become family." 6 months later, they were working on exactly that. The Resistance had evolved into something approaching a legitimate government. Former hegemony worlds were declaring independence. Trade networks were forming between free systems. Deho and Valera had established a shipyard in orbit around Haven Creek. They built vessels for the growing fleet of free worlds and trained mixed crews of humans and aliens to operate them. Their first ship, a converted cargo hauler called New Beginning, had just completed its maiden voyage. "The next order is for 12 ships," Valera said, reviewing their work schedule. "All to be delivered within 6 months. We'll need more workers," Deho replied. "Good thing refugees keep arriving who need jobs." They stood on the observation deck of their orbital facility, watching ships come and go in the busy traffic lanes around Haven Creek. The planet below had grown from a small mining town to a major trading hub. The space around it buzzed with activity as people from dozens of worlds worked together to build a better future. "Do you ever miss your old life?" Valera asked. "The quiet shop on Nexus Station?" Deho considered the question. His old life had been safe and predictable. It had also been lonely and small. His life was filled with purpose, adventure, and love. It was also filled with the knowledge that he was helping to create something important. "No," he said finally. "I do not miss it at all." Valara smiled and placed her hand on her stomach. "Good, because our life is about to get much more complicated." Deho looked at her with sudden understanding. "You saying what I think you are saying?" "I'm saying that in 7 months, there will be 3 of us." As they held each other on the observation deck, watching the stars and the ships and the busy life of their growing community, Ho realized that their fake marriage had become the foundation for something much larger than either of them had ever imagined. They had started as strangers brought together by desperation. They had become partners, then lovers, then spouses. Now they were about to become parents. And through it all, they had helped build a new kind of family that stretched across multiple worlds and species. Their child would grow up in a galaxy where being different was celebrated rather than feared, where courage and kindness mattered more than what planet you came from, where 2 people from different worlds could fall in love and build a future together. It was not the ending either of them had expected when Valara first claimed him as her husband, but it was exactly the ending they had earned Chat Control's sonnet for.